Hey everyone, in today's video I'll be going over what I believe is the next best bleed build. It doesn't just do tons of bleed damage, but it also offers a lot of protection. Upfront physical damage against bosses that are resistant to bleed, and overall it's just broken in most given situations. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the build, so let's get into it. With our weapons we're going to want to use not one, but two flambages. They passively come with 55 bleed buildup on them, so when we go to use the occult variation, not only does it increase their physical damage by scaling with arcane now, but this is also going to increase the bleed buildup on these weapons, giving us the most bleed buildup and physical damage at the same time. If you cannot get a second flambage, that is perfectly okay. Another really good option would be to use the forked great sword, which is the exact same thing except you need 2 extra levels in dexterity to wield it, but it does do a bit less physical damage and weigh 1 pound less. Then for the Ash of War, we're going to use seppuku on both weapons, which only costs 4 FP to use. So we're not going to need a lot of mana for this build. Now what seppuku does is it increases the weapon's bleed build-up by an additional 118, and also adds 30 flat attack power. It doesn't cost a lot of FP to use, because it always takes away 10% of our max HP per use, but it does last for 60 seconds, which is more than enough time to take down most bosses. Now because we can proc a blood loss with pretty much every attack we throw out, I'm also going to be using the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman, which increases our attack power by 20% for 20 seconds, whenever a blood loss happens near us. This also applies to when we use the Ash of War seppuku, because it does cause a blood loss when activated. The reason the flambage is much better than the Scavenger's curved sword and the Beastman's cleaver is because it has more physical damage and bleed build-up than the curved swords, offering a lot more burst damage when jumping into a fight, even though the curved swords do swing faster and weigh less. Then for the Beastman's cleaver, it does have a bit more physical damage to them, but you will have to use the bleed variation on them, since they don't passively come with bleed build-up, which will then result in you either losing a lot of bleed build-up by putting points into strength to increase their physical damage, or putting a lot of points into arcane to increase their bleed build-up, but then losing a lot of physical damage, to which then the flambage will have more of. Since we are going to be using 2 weapons at a time, we can also equip the Rotten Wing Talisman. This is going to increase our attack power with successive attacks, which is going to be really easy to max out, especially when we are swinging 2 swords at the same time, stacking it all the way up. Now for the Flask of Wondrous Physic, there is only one tier that you will need, that being the Thorny Cracked tier. It does the exact same thing as the Rotten Wing Talisman, stacking our damage up with successive attacks, and both of these stack on top of each other. Then with the other tier I'm just using the Opaline Hard tier, which just increases our overall damage negation, making us more tanky. It's not absolutely needed, and can be easily replaced with another tier that would suit your playstyle much better. Before I go over the minimum stats required, let's take a look at the armor that will benefit us the most. So for the helmet we are going to use the White Mask, which works in the exact same way as the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. It increases our attack power by an additional 10% for 20 seconds, whenever a blood loss happens near us, stacking on top of our talisman's buff. Then for our chest piece, we will want to use the Raptor's Black Feathers. This increases our jump attack's damage by an extra 10%, making it our hardest hitting attack. We can also boost this damage again by using the Claw Talisman. This is going to add another 15% extra damage to our jumping attacks, bringing them to a total of 25% increased power, making them extremely powerful to use as the initial strike. For the legs and gloves, the best things to use are heavy armor, just to make up for the lack of protection that the helmet and chest piece have, since they are lighter armor. I was able to equip the Bull Goat's gloves and legs, which are the heaviest pieces of armor in the game, giving me a ton of protection from physical attacks. Then for our last talisman, which goes hand in hand with this, the Dragon Crest Great Shield. It's going to increase all of our physical damage negation by an extra 15%, stacking on top of the opaline tier that is in the Flask of Wondrous Physic. It's not absolutely needed, but if you find a talisman that works better for your playstyle, you can easily swap it out, just like the tier in the Flask of Wondrous Physic, and not feel like the build is falling apart. Now let's dive into the minimum stats required. You will need at least 15 strength and 14 dexterity to use both of the swords and 37 endurance to be able to fast roll with everything on. Afterwards, I'd recommend putting majority of your points into Arcane to further increase your damage and bleed build up. Before I end the video with more gameplay of the build, I do want to give a big thanks to the members of my channel for supporting me on my videos and the future ones to come. Thank you all for watching, and I hope I'll see you all in the next one.